This isn't just a football story, and it definitely isn't a normal endorsement deal. Because right now, Shedeur Sanders is doing something that almost no young athlete has ever pulled off. Reports are swirling that he stepped straight out of the locker room and into the luxury fashion world, making a high-profile debut with AMIRI in Paris. And the number being whispered has people doing double takes. $80 million. Now, before anyone jumps ahead, this isn't just about wearing designer clothes or posting a few pictures online. According to reports, this move puts Shedeur on a completely different stage. High fashion, European runways, the kind of world most athletes never even get invited into, let alone welcomed by. And that's what makes this moment so wild. Because Shedeur isn't retired, he's not coasting off a legacy career, he's still building his football future, yet brands are already treating him like a global icon. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens when influence outweighs position and culture matters as much as stats. Luxury fashion has always been selective about who it aligns with. These brands don't just chase popularity, they chase relevance. And right now, Shedeur sits at a rare intersection of sports, street culture, and youth influence that companies are desperate to tap into. But here's the part that really flips the script. This fashion move didn't come out of nowhere. It fits a pattern of long-term thinking, leverage, and business decisions that suggest Shedeur isn't just playing the athlete game, he's playing the ownership game. And once you start looking at his recent moves through that lens, everything starts to feel different. Because if the reports are even close to true, this isn't about a single deal or a single moment. It's about a blueprint. A new kind of athlete, one who understands that the real power isn't just what you earn on the field, it's what you build off of it. And the craziest part, this might only be the beginning. What's happening with Shedeur Sanders right now doesn't feel real, and that's exactly why people can't stop talking about it. One moment he's known primarily for what he does on the field. The next, reports suggest he's in Paris preparing to step into a world most athletes never touch. Luxury fashion, high-end designers, global runways. According to widespread buzz online, Shedeur, alongside his brother, is connected to a major move with AMIRI, a label already respected in elite fashion circles. And this isn't a background role. What's being discussed isn't just appearances or sponsored outfits. Reports claim Shedeur is expected to walk the runway, a move that instantly separates him from the typical athlete-brand relationship. This isn't about posting a photo in designer clothes. This is about stepping directly into the fashion world as a participant, not a prop. That distinction matters. Luxury fashion has always been selective. These brands don't just align with popularity, they align with image, influence, and long-term relevance. For an active football player to even be considered for that space signals something bigger happening behind the scenes. It suggests brands aren't just betting on Shedeur's performance, they're betting on his presence. And the timing makes it even more striking. Shedeur hasn't finished building his football legacy. He hasn't had a decade-long career. He's still early in his journey, yet the opportunities around him already resemble those usually reserved for icons. That tells you this isn't about stats alone, it's about culture. Luxury brands have been chasing authenticity for years, trying to bridge the gap between high fashion and street influence. According to reports, that's exactly where Shedeur fits. He represents a generation that blends sports, style, and self-awareness seamlessly without feeling forced. From the outside, it might look like a sudden leap. But in reality, this feels like the natural extension of how Shedeur has positioned himself from the start. Confident, visible, unapologetic about his value, comfortable in spaces that weren't traditionally open to athletes like him. And that's why this Paris moment matters. Not because it's flashy, but because it signals a shift. A shift in how athletes are viewed, marketed, and empowered. The locker room and the runway used to be separate worlds. Now, Shedeur Sanders is standing at the intersection of both. And once you see that, it becomes clear, this isn't just a fashion story. It's the opening chapter of something much bigger. Luxury fashion doesn't move on impulse. These brands are slow, selective, and extremely protective of their image. They don't chase hype, they chase longevity. That's why the attention around Shedeur Sanders has raised so many eyebrows. Because this isn't a typical athlete endorsement story. According to reports, brands like AMIRI aren't interested in Shedeur simply because he plays football. They're interested because of what he represents outside the game: influence, identity, cultural relevance, things that can't be faked or manufactured through marketing alone. Luxury fashion has been trying to crack one problem for years: how to stay elite without feeling out of touch. Traditional runway models don't move culture the way they used to. Younger audiences want authenticity. They want real people who actually live the lifestyle, not just wear it for a photo shoot. That's where Shedeur fits. Reports suggest brands see him as someone who naturally bridges worlds that rarely overlap: high fashion and street culture, luxury and everyday life, sports and style. He doesn't feel like a guest in those spaces, he feels like he belongs there. And that distinction matters. Unlike many athletes who adopt fashion late in their careers, Shedeur has always leaned into it. His style choices, confidence, and visibility have been part of his public image long before any rumored Paris runway moment. That consistency makes brands more comfortable betting big because it doesn't feel forced. There's also the cultural layer. Luxury brands have increasingly acknowledged that Black American culture drives global trends, from music to fashion to slang to lifestyle. According to reports, Shedeur is viewed as someone who genuinely represents that culture without diluting it, not as a spokesperson reading a script, but as a participant living it in real time. That's powerful. For a brand like AMIRI, aligning with someone like Shedeur isn't just about selling clothes. It's about relevance, staying connected to the next generation without chasing them awkwardly, using influence that already exists instead of trying to create it. And then there's timing. Shedeur is still early in his football journey. That means brands aren't buying a finished story, they're buying upside, growth, visibility that could multiply over time as his career evolves. So when people ask why luxury brands are circling, the answer isn't just money or fame. It's positioning. Shedeur Sanders represents a shift where athletes aren't just endorsers but cultural anchors, where style, confidence, and self-awareness matter as much as performance. And once luxury brands see that potential, they don't wait. They move early. Because in their world, relevance isn't something you react to, it's something you secure before everyone else catches on. This is the moment where the story around Shedeur Sanders stopped being about endorsements and started being about ownership. Because according to widely discussed reports, Shedeur was once presented with a deal that most athletes would have signed without hesitation. A massive offer from Gatorade, reportedly worth tens of millions over just a few years. The kind of contract that secures your future instantly. The kind agents dream about. But instead of treating it like a finish line, Shedeur reportedly treated it like a negotiation starting point. What's been said is that he didn't just want to be paid for visibility. He wanted to be invested in the outcome. Rather than taking a straight salary-style endorsement, reports claim Shedeur pushed for something far rarer: equity. Actual ownership tied to the success of the brand he was helping promote. If true, that decision alone explains why so many people now talk about him differently. Because endorsements end, equity compounds. Most athletes are taught to maximize upfront money because careers are short. Shedeur, according to these reports, flipped that logic. Instead of asking, "How much can I make right now?" the move suggested he was asking, "What does this become over time?" That mindset is uncommon, especially this early. Even a small ownership stake in a global brand carries implications most people don't immediately grasp. Revenue doesn't stop when the season ends. Checks don't depend on playing time. The value grows quietly year after year while the athlete focuses on their career. And that's why this move, whether fully confirmed or still partially speculative, changed the conversation. It signaled that Shedeur wasn't trying to win the endorsement game, he was trying to outgrow it. It also sent a message to other brands watching closely. If you want access to his platform, it's not just about money, it's about partnership, alignment, long-term vision. That instantly changes leverage. Instead of being one of many athletes promoting products, Shedeur positioned himself as someone who helps build them. That distinction is subtle but powerful. And once that line is crossed, it's hard to go back. Because now, every deal gets viewed differently, not as a check but as a stake, not as exposure but as equity and influence. That's why people keep calling this a turning point. Not because of the dollar amount, but because it revealed how Shedeur Sanders thinks. And once you understand that, every move that follows fashion, branding, partnerships stops looking random. It starts looking intentional. This is where Shedeur Sanders' approach separates him from almost everyone else in his generation. Because when the conversation shifts to Nike, the story stops being about logos and starts being about leverage. According to widely discussed reports, Shedeur didn't enter his Nike partnership like a traditional rookie. Most athletes sign standard endorsement deals, fixed numbers, fixed timelines, and very little flexibility. What's been said about Shedeur's situation is very different. The structure reportedly included performance-based clauses that could dramatically change the value of the deal once he officially stepped onto an NFL field. And that's a big deal. Those kinds of clauses aren't common, especially for young players. They're usually reserved for established stars who already have proof of impact. But reports suggest Nike wasn't just betting on what Shedeur had done, they were betting on what he was about to do. The moment he saw preseason action, discussions online claim that certain triggers were activated. Value escalators, revenue-sharing mechanisms, clauses that turned potential into reality almost overnight. Whether every detail is exact or not, the takeaway is clear: this wasn't a passive deal. It was designed to grow. And that's where leverage comes in. Shedeur didn't walk into negotiations needing Nike. Nike walked in knowing they didn't want to miss him. His visibility, his audience, and his cultural relevance gave him something most rookies don't have: options. And when you have options, you don't negotiate like everyone else. What's especially rare is how these deals reportedly extended beyond just upfront money. Discussions around jersey sales, royalties, and percentage-based earnings have fueled debate because those structures are almost unheard of at that stage of a career. Most players get paid once. Shedeur's reported setup suggests he gets paid repeatedly, as long as demand exists. That's power. It also explains why draft position didn't define his earning potential. While others waited to see where they landed, Shedeur's brand value was already operating on a different axis. Visibility beat placement, demand beat order. And Nike, of all companies, understands demand better than anyone. They don't just sign athletes, they sign futures. So when people question how a young player could command that level of structure, the answer isn't mystery. It's math, audience size, engagement, cultural pull, and the confidence to ask for more when you know the market needs you. This Nike chapter isn't about shoes. It's about proof. Proof that Shedeur Sanders isn't reacting to opportunities, he's engineering them. And once a brand like Nike accepts that dynamic, it reshapes how every future deal gets negotiated. Because after that, you're no longer just an athlete. You're a platform. For decades, the NFL sold one idea above all else: draft position defines your future. Higher pick, bigger contract; lower pick, smaller opportunity. That's how it was supposed to work. But what's happening with Shedeur Sanders is forcing people to rethink that entire equation. Because despite not being universally viewed as a top-tier draft lock early on, Shedeur's off-field influence has consistently outpaced expectations. Reports and industry chatter suggest his jersey sales, visibility, and brand pull have rivaled, and in some cases surpassed, players taken ahead of him. And that reality exposes something the league doesn't always like to admit. Market value doesn't always match draft order. Shedeur's name moves product, his image drives engagement, his presence brings attention. Those things matter just as much, sometimes more, than where your name is called on draft night. Brands don't get paid in draft grades, they get paid in demand. And demand follows influence. While other rookies waited to see how their careers would unfold before building leverage, Shedeur's platform was already active. Fans knew him, fashion followed him, conversations formed around him. That meant when endorsement talks started, he wasn't negotiating from hope, he was negotiating from proof. That's why draft position became secondary. It didn't matter if he was picked earlier or later. His audience came with him. His relevance moved independently of the draft board, and that's a powerful position to be in, especially in a league that's slowly becoming more entertainment-driven by the year. What makes this shift so important is what it signals to the next generation. The draft still matters, it always will, But it's no longer the sole gatekeeper of opportunity. Visibility, branding, and cultural connection now play a role that can't be ignored. Shedeur didn't wait for the league to assign him value, he built it himself. That's why comparisons to other prospects miss the point. Some players were drafted higher, some were praised more heavily by analysts, but Shedeur's influence didn't depend on that validation. It existed regardless, and once brands and fans showed up, the market followed. This isn't about skipping the process. It's about expanding it. Shedeur Sanders showed that draft night is a moment, not a ceiling. That your career isn't defined by where you start, but by how well you understand leverage, timing, and visibility. And in a league where attention is currency, he proved something quietly but clearly. Being chosen matters, but being wanted matters more. What really separates Shedeur Sanders from most young athletes isn't one deal or one headline. It's the pattern. Because while many players wait until later in their careers to explore business opportunities, Shedeur started early, and more importantly, he started strategically. None of these moves feel random, they feel connected. Reports and interviews suggest he's been building a portfolio, not chasing checks. From launching his own apparel line to partnering with EA Sports for exclusive content, each move ties back to his audience. Young, engaged, digital first. These aren't side hustles meant to cash out quickly, they're extensions of his brand. Then there's the lifestyle angle. Shedeur has been linked to ventures that reflect who he is, not just what sells. A signature barbecue sauce that nods to family roots, apparel that mirrors his everyday style, partnerships that align with wellness, performance, and long-term image rather than short-term hype. According to reports, he's even worked with Brady Brand, connecting himself with a legacy name while still carving out his own identity. That balance matters. A lot of athletes lose authenticity once business enters the picture. Everything starts to feel corporate, overproduced, detached. What kept Shedeur's momentum strong is that fans don't see him as selling out. They see him as building out, expanding without abandoning who he is. And that's rare. Each venture also serves a purpose. Apparel builds visibility. Gaming keeps him connected to younger fans. Food products tap into everyday culture. Wellness partnerships align him with longevity. Together, they form an ecosystem, not a collection of logos. This is where the empire conversation starts to make sense. Shedeur isn't positioning himself as someone who reacts to opportunities. He's positioning himself as someone who creates lanes others can step into later. Ownership, control, direction, those themes keep showing up. And it all traces back to mindset. Instead of viewing football as the end goal, Shedeur appears to treat it as the foundation, the engine that powers everything else. That doesn't mean the game doesn't matter, it means it isn't the only thing that does. Most athletes wait for success before they think long-term. Shedeur built long-term thinking into his rise. And that's why this feels different. Because when you zoom out, you're not looking at a player stacking endorsements. You're watching someone assemble infrastructure early, intentionally, and in public. An empire doesn't start when the career ends. It starts when someone realizes their platform is bigger than the field. And Shedeur Sanders figured that out faster than almost anyone else. When you step back and look at the full picture, it becomes clear this isn't just a story about deals, money, or headlines. It's about a shift. What Shedeur Sanders represents is something athletes before him rarely had the freedom to fully embrace: control. Control over image, control over timing, control over how value is created, not just collected. For decades, the blueprint was simple: play well, get drafted, sign endorsements, hope your career lasts long enough to cash in. Anything beyond that was considered a bonus. But Shedeur flipped that order. He built leverage first, he understood attention first, and he treated football not as the finish line but as the launch pad. That's the part that changes everything. Because once an athlete realizes their influence exists beyond the field, the rules shift. Contracts stop being endpoints and start becoming tools. Endorsements turn into partnerships, and short-term checks give way to long-term positioning. What makes this moment even more important is timing. Shedeur isn't doing this late in his career after his legacy is already written. He's doing it while the story is still unfolding. That means every move compounds the next one. Every audience grows the platform. Every partnership increases leverage, and suddenly the athlete isn't chasing opportunity, opportunity is chasing him. This is why people keep calling it a blueprint. Not because everyone can copy it, but because it shows what's possible when athletes understand their value early, when they think beyond salary, when they realize that culture, authenticity, and ownership matter just as much as performance. And this doesn't just affect him. It changes expectations for the next generation. Young players watching this aren't just dreaming about touchdowns anymore. They're thinking about equity, about branding, about how to protect their future while still chasing greatness on the field. That doesn't mean the game doesn't matter. It means the game isn't the only thing that matters. Shedeur Sanders didn't invent this shift, but he's becoming one of its clearest examples. An athlete who understands that legacy isn't built only by what you do on Sundays, but by what you create around it. So when people ask whether this is sustainable or whether it's too much too soon, they might be missing the point. This isn't about speed. It's about vision. And if this really is the new athlete blueprint, then what we're watching right now isn't the peak of Shedeur Sanders' story. It's the foundation.